Good evening, folks, and welcome to See the Trends. Sorry I can't be with you live. Without further ado, let's go ahead and share the charts. We'll start by taking a look at the overall market first. So we're going to take a look here at the NASDAQ, the top 100 technology companies. And we can see we had a dark cloud candle on Friday, which suggests that the NASDAQ could easily come back to around about 9,100. And what hasn't gone away is the pullback to around about 8,300. And if it doesn't like, or if it wants to finish with the uptrend, it could go back down to previous lows. We do have a little bit of weakness in the MACD bars here and a hint of an upside down V for both RSI and stochastics. So that's just the top 100 technology companies. Next one we're going to take a look at is the Dow, the 30 largest companies by market capitalization. That already has made the upside down V here on stochastics, has a little bit more 2 or 3 days of hidden weakness in the MACD bars. So again, that has the potential to come back to around about 27,000. And again, if it wants to gravitate back towards previous lows, we could be looking around about 25,000. Next thing we'll take a look at is the S&P 500, which is a fair reflection of the overall market. So the S&P 500, similar dark cloud cover we got on Friday, so it definitely has the potential to come back to here, which is 3,250, and again back to around about 3,000 would also be doable. And if it wants to revisit the previous lows here back in August, around about 2,800. The reason why we're mentioning this to you up front is that when it does happen, it will probably be on the news because that'll be the first significant pullback in a while. So just so as you know about it up front, you don't get freaked out. You've been told that it's going to happen. The last thing to take a look at is the VIX. And the VIX, as we know, is a mirror image of the market. So the VIX has come down, it's done the 3 major rolls down, it's building up a little bit of a sideways base. You've already got the V for victory here in stochastics and RSI and loads of hidden strength in the MACD bars, which suggests that if the market does pull back, then the VIX will probably do 3 rolls up and end up around about the mid-20s. And the VIX is a very handy guide to let you know when the market has reached the bottom. That's the overall market. And as we all know, we don't trade the overall market. We're more interested in specific companies and how they are doing compared to the overall market. So ABB, we've been talking about this for a while, that we know that the overall trend could take us back up to 30, but it might want to take a breather before it can go again. You've got loads of weakness in the MACD bars here for ABB. Next one is AEIS, and again that has the potential to pull back to support of around about 64. Next one is AEO. AEO is support is around about 14, resistance is around about 16, so it has the potential to climb back up to around about 16 is doable, and maybe around about 17 for AEO. It all depends on its results. Next one is AES. As you can see, AES is in the super highway. This is the normal highway, so easily has the potential to pull back to 19, weakness in the MACD bars, etc. Next one is ANF. ANF is done 3 rolls up here. It's going to obviously depend on the earnings results. It's on the bottom of the third row here again. So it might have to bounce off here before it goes again. And depending on the results, it has the potential to go back up to around about 20. ASNA is next. ASNA is back down as support. Has the potential to go back up to around about 11. BB has broken out of the downtrend. Might have to close this gap first before it can go again. We often see gaps getting closed. So it's done the 3 little mini rolls up. It might have to close this gap before it can go again back up to around about $7.70, $8. Next one is Bed Bath & Beyond. So Bed Bath & Beyond has closed that gap pretty quickly, did 3 rolls up. Then it gapped down and earnings gravitated back towards previous low. And now it has closed that gap. The indicator is a bunch around the middle, which would suggest maybe it wants to trade sideways for a bit. Next one is BKE. Buckle. So Buckle, if it continues this downtrend, is in underneath the 10 and 20. Could easily revisit 23. CHK is back down at the support prices of last November. That's because oil prices dropped there recently. We'll take a look at that in a minute. If it wants to trade sideways, is something that could do something along the lines of between 50 to $1. Next one is CHS. Again, CHS has already done 2 rolls up. It is at the bottom of the second roll. It's important it stays above $4, and if it can do that, next resistance is around about 570, 580. CNDT is looking to make new lows. It's never been this low since it broke away from Xerox, or was a breakaway company from Xerox. So it's looking to find a bit of a base before it can go again. There's 2 major rolls here, so if we can do the third roll, next resistance will be 750 if it gets back into an upward trend. CRUS, again, it's linked very much to Apple. So if Apple was to take a pullback, you could see it coming back to around about 70, or even maybe back to this spike that it did around about 62. Loads of weakness in the MACD bars. Cisco's up against resistance now. It may want to pull back a little bit, certainly back to maybe these lows here, which is around about 47. It could also revisit 45, 44. Discus looking to build a bit of support here at around about 29.50. So put this one on your watch list if you see some sign of recovery here. If it can't hold at this point, the next support is around about 26, 27. DKS looks like it's beginning the downtrend that we talked about last week. It's gone in underneath the 10 and 20. Could easily revisit 41, 42, and if it wants to keep going, the next support is around about 38. And the next support under that is around about 32. ECA again Just took a bit of a drop last week because oil prices dropped. Kind of trading sideways. So if it can bounce off this level here, the next resistance is around about $5. Ericsson gap down, probably to do with earnings. So look for the reverse J and look for them to eventually close that gap back up to around about 9. FCX gap down on Thursday, but then recovered very strongly after doing the 3 major rolls up. So now it has broken out of the uptrend. Now it has gravitated back to previous lows, and watch to see if it can hold that. I mean, it's probably will gravitate back to its 10 and 20-day moving average anyway, but it needs to hold firm around about 11. If it goes below 11, it might want to gravitate back to the previous low here of around about 10. Plenty of weakness in the MACD bars here. Next one is FLR. FLR has got a lot of long-term upside. It's dropped all the way from $65 down to 15. It's kind of trading sideways at the moment. It's tipped by value line to go back up to 40 minimum and 60 maximum. So there's a potential to double or triple the share price over the next 3 to 5 years. Certainly the first target here for FLR is to get to the bottom of this gap here, around about 28. Might have to pull back a little bit before it does that. Next one is Fossil. The Fossil value line report is beginning to read strong again. You can see Fossil climbing back up to around about 10.50, depends on its results. May have to pull back a little bit before it goes again. General Electric is still in the fast lane. So this was the main lane of traffic. This is what you would expect it to happen, but it went up in the fast lane. May have to do one more roll here, but then it could pull back to around about 10. And GPS tends to have a strong first quarter depending on the results. Trade a little bit sideways at the moment, so look for it to trade between 16 and 20 will be the next resistance for GPS. Hawaiian Airlines here is done the 3 rolls up. Looks like it's done 2 rolls down, so one more roll down would take you back to previous lows. You can see the indicators are bunched around about the middle as well. Hain has now finally completed that second roll. It was very long and drawn out. There was roll 1. Roll took a long time to happen. There's a little bit more to go to get to maybe 24 support, and then if you can do the third roll, back up to around about 29. Next one is Harley Davidson. So Harley did roll 1, roll 2, never got to do that third roll, so that's unfinished business. For the meantime, it's gravitating back towards previous lows. The indicators are looking good in the right place. If we can find support around 34, 33. Hewlett Packard is in the process of closing this gap. Back up to here, it never got to close this gap. Back up to around about 24. So it seems to be on a bit of a mission to close that gap if we can stay above the 10 and 20-day moving average. HRB is definitely a candidate to consider because they do most of their sales and most of their profit in this quarter. Trading sideways between 23 and 25 with the potential to break out back up to around about 30. INFY is another very strong company. Moves a little bit slowly, but it's done roll 1, roll 2 looks under that, and roll 3 could take you back up to $12 over the next 3 to 6 months. IPG is another strong company. It's trading sideways. Worth putting on your watch list to see if it comes back down to around about 20. It's done 3 rolls up now, so it could easily revisit previous lows and pull back to around about 21.20. So take a close look at that. Study the value line report now proactively, so when you see it back down at support of 20, you'll be familiar with it. JBL is due a bit of a pullback. It's at a major resistance point and could easily revisit 34. JetBlue now is on the top of the second roll. Could probably revisit 19, and then if it wants to go back up to the previous high, which will be around about 23. Next was Juniper. Juniper again is another strong company. It's done 2 rows up. It's kind of trading a little bit sideways here. You can see the indicators a bunch around about the middle. So after one more sideways roll, if we can continue that third roll, 27.50 is the next target for Juniper. Next one is KFY. KFY is up against resistance now. Take a close look at that graph. It could easily revisit support, which would take you back down to around about 41. Next one is KHC. KHC has done 2 rolls. And if it wants to complete that third roll and get back up to the bottom of the gap, that will take you back up to around about 36. Next one is KR. Again, another strong company, broken out of the downward trend, back in an upward trend. Could easily revisit 27 before it goes again back up to these previous highs here of around about 31. LB is another stock that, depending on its results, it's getting close to the first bit of resistance. And the next bit of resistance above that is around about 25. And then the next resistance, if it wants to do 3 rolls up, could take you back up to around about 28. Southwest did the 3 rolls up, 1, 2, and 3. In one day gravitated back to the previous low and then bounced off that again. It's looking very strong again. That's probably to do with the price of oil coming down. And so if it can continue that upward momentum, 60, 62 is a possibility. Mattel is on the top of the third roll, so now's the chance to proactively collect the fall before it happens. There's roll 1, roll 2, roll 3 would take you back down to 12. And then after 3 rolls up, we might want to revisit a previous low and go as low as 11. MU is at the top of the third roll, and it would be very feasible for MU to revisit support here at around about 48. Upside down V here for stochastics RSI, and again, it could even go as low as the previous low of 44. MBR pulled back because of oil. We'll show the oil price now in a minute. It did the 3 rolls down here. 3 rolls up, so now it's in the process of looking for previous low, which may be back down to 225 before it can go again. NCR again is looking for the next support, which could easily come at around about 33. NEM is coming close to the top of the third roll. There's 1, 2, and one more roll will take you up to here, and it could easily pull back to around about 42. Nokia has done the first job, that is to challenge the bottom of the gap. The next target is to get into the gap and then close the gap. So may have to pull back a little bit first before it can go again. ODP is still in an upward trend. Now if it can continue the upward trend, the next target is around about $3. So this shows you oil prices pulling back, which pulled down some of the oil stocks. It has done a little bit of a doji. You could see it going back up to around about 7. ON again is on the top of the third roll. There's roll 1, roll 2, roll 3 could easily revisit 23. And then if it wants to revisit a previous low, it could come down to 21. Pets hit the previous resistance here of 27.5. And looks like it wants to pull back to around about 22, which will be, if it can do a sideways trend, it looks something like that. And then what hasn't gone away is it may want to still close this gap as well at some stage here to close the gap and back down to previous support. PWR is trading a little bit sideways at the moment. Again, it's very sensitive to oil prices. So there's a sideways trend going on here. If oil prices can improve, you can see it completing that third roll And if not, you might want to revisit the previous low. Again, the indicator is a bunch around about the middle, which would suggest a continuation of a sideways trend. So it looks like Skechers is finally pulling back. There's row 1, there's row 2. Row 3 will take you back down to 34. Because it's done 3 rolls up, it may even have to gravitate back to around about 30. And how it reacts depends on its earnings as well. But when you see the long-term stochastics down here, when you see this sort of pattern here, that's when you can get interested again in Skechers. SLV looks like it's trading sideways between support of 1550 and resistance around about 1720. SNV gap down, but it was going to get back down to around about 34 anyway, so get interested again in SLV around about 34. It is a strong company. So you can see it dropping all the way back down to 34 now. SWN again was also affected by the oil and energy prices. It had done 3 rolls anyway, gravitate back to previous lows, so you could see it bouncing off here to go back up to 260, 270. Tech is another one for your watch list. It's back down to previous support here. So if you can see it showing signs of strength here again, it could go back up to around about 1750 and 18 if it wants to continue that sideways trend. Berkshire took a significant position on Teva. It's finished with the long-term downward trend. Looks like it's trading sideways for the moment between 9 and 11. Urban's another very strong company. For the long term, it lives between 20 and 50. So again, it's one for your watch list. It could bounce off 26 and go back up to around about 30. Viva is attempting to break out of this resistance. Has challenged this resistance point 3 times. The next time it challenges it, it could break up to the upside, which would take you back up to 1250. WAB again continues the upward trend. Next support is around about 74. WBA, another very strong company. Done the 3 rolls up, revisiting previous lows. Another one for your watch list. All the indicators look in the right spot. Could bounce off 50 and take you back up to around about 60, which is a 20% gain. Winnebago's going from strength to strength, but the next obvious support for Winnebago is around about 46. US Steel is at an all-time low, so that's another one for your watch list. Could revisit 14. And then the last one is Xerox. And Xerox is beginning the downtrend. It's in underneath the 10 and 20, could easily revisit 31. So that's all the shares. Just a couple of things I want to share with you. First of all, there's an interesting study of economic cycles here, which was discovered by a Russian economist back in 1892, and he died in 1938. But his predictions back then of continue to repeat, and that there's 4 cycles. You've got inflation, high inflation, disinflation, and deflation. So there are 4 periods like winter, spring, summer, and autumn. So the last time the Dow Jones in 1949 was trading around about 200, and then in 1966 it went up to around about 1,000, which is a 500% gain. According to these economic cycles, we are in the start of inflation cycle. So we're in from 2015 to 2030. The Dow Jones was 10,000 back in 2015. It's forecast to go to 50,000 by 2030. And that would tie in with if the US economy continues to thrive and prosper, especially if Trump gets reelected, that is enough to drive the market up to a high of 50,000 in 2030. So the last time it did this, the cycle back in 1949, it was trading around about 200. And then at the top of the cycle in 1966, it was trading at 1,000. And obviously it did the classic 3 rolls up. And so when this forecast was done, the Dow was at 10,000. And as we know, at the moment, the Dow is around about 27, 28. So we're a bit more to go to get to the top of this cycle. That's just an interesting thing about cycles. The second thing I want to show you is just to remember there is always money to be made on selling puts and buying them back. So this is just an example of a club. Last month they did all their trades on the, as you can see here, they did all their trades on the 12th, 3rd of December. So they sold Infi put, HOB put, Take put, Urban put, and FLR. And then they closed out all their trades as they went into profit in 19th, and so they closed them out there before the expiration. And so their net gains from selling all the 5 puts was 3,600, and then the cost of buyback was 268. So they netted 3,400 in the space of about 5 weeks, which was 7.7% of their overall account. So remember, if you do have spare buying power, you can sell the put and buy it back and not take any shares and still make some money. Okay, folks, thanks for your time and attention. We'll see you in the next support session. Just to let you know, the 2 companies that Andrew will be doing on Monday will be KHC and Teva, Kraft Heinz Corporation and Teva.